In the peaceful town of Riverside, Oregon, with a population that barely reached 3,000 souls, the sort of place where neighbors still offered waves from their front porches, and children played without worry in quiet cul-de-sacs, nobody could have possibly imagined that genuine evil resided behind a white picket fence and flower boxes that overflowed abundantly with petunias. On March 15, 2015, a mother and her 6-year-old daughter disappeared without leaving a single trace after visiting the person who should have been their greatest protector, the grandmother. For 8 long years, the community conducted searches, offered prayers, and grieved deeply. For 8 agonizing years, one woman guarded a terrible secret buried beneath her own home. This is the complete story of Ashley and Emma Mitchell, a case that would ultimately demonstrate that sometimes the greatest monsters are the very ones we welcome to Sunday dinner. Before we immerse ourselves in this deeply haunting case, if you truly appreciate thorough deep-dive true crime investigations that maintain respect for the victims while simultaneously uncovering the truth, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This particular case required years to piece together properly, and what investigators eventually discovered would shake this small Oregon community to its absolute core. By the conclusion of this video, you'll fully understand why some families conceal secrets that should never be kept hidden, and how justice, though significantly delayed, can still find its way into the darkest possible corners. Ashley Mitchell was 28 years old in the spring of 2015, a woman whose infectious laugh possessed the power to brighten even the dreariest Pacific Northwest afternoon. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches tall with shoulder-length chestnut brown hair that she customarily wore pulled back in a practical ponytail, Ashley had warm, hazel eyes that crinkled distinctively at the corners when she smiled, which occurred often. She worked as a dental hygienist at Riverside Family Dentistry, a position she genuinely loved because it provided her with opportunities to connect with people, to ease their anxieties, to make a meaningful difference in small but significant ways. Her co-workers consistently described her as the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday without fail, who brought homemade cookies to the break room regularly, who stayed late to help clean up even when it wasn't her designated responsibility. But Ashley's greatest role, the one that defined her more completely than any other, was being Emma's mother. She had Emma young, at 22 years of age, as a single mother following a relationship that didn't ultimately last. Rather than viewing this circumstance as a setback, Ashley embraced motherhood with a fierce determination that genuinely impressed everyone who knew her personally. She worked full-time hours, attended night classes at the community college, studying business administration, and still somehow managed to be fully present for every school event, every bedtime story, every scraped knee that needed kissing better. Ashley's small apartment on Maple Street was modest in size, but absolutely filled with love. The walls decorated extensively with Emma's artwork, the refrigerator completely covered in spelling tests marked with gold stars, and hand-drawn pictures of stick figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun. Those who knew Ashley well spoke frequently of her remarkable resilience, her persistent optimism despite various struggles, her unwavering belief that hard work and kindness would ultimately create a better life for her beloved daughter. She harbored dreams, finishing her college degree, perhaps opening her own dental practice someday, providing Emma with opportunities she herself never had access to. She was the kind of mother who packed nutritious lunches with little encouraging notes tucked inside, who sang off-key in the car and didn't care who heard her, who made ordinary Tuesdays feel genuinely special with impromptu dance parties in the kitchen. Ashley's smile was genuine and warm, her hugs were warm and lingering, and she had a special way of making Emma feel like the most important person in any room they entered. Emma Mitchell, 6 years old that particular March, was everything a mother could possibly hope for in a daughter. Small for her age, standing just 3 feet 8 inches tall and weighing 45 pounds, Emma had inherited her mother's chestnut hair, though hers fell in natural waves down to her shoulders, often adorned with colorful clips shaped like butterflies or flowers. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue, a genetic trait from her father's side, wide and curious, and constantly taking in the world around her with genuine wonder. She had a spattering of freckles scattered across her nose that became more prominent during summer months, and a gap between her 2 front teeth that gave her smile an endearing quality that made adults instinctively smile back at her. Emma was enrolled in 1st grade at Riverside Elementary, where her teacher, Mrs. Patricia Holmes, described her as bright, eager to learn new things, and exceptionally kind to other children in her class. She loved reading passionately, particularly fairy tales and stories about animals, and could often be found during recess sitting beneath the big oak tree in the playground, completely lost in a book rather than running around like her classmates typically did. But don't mistake her quiet nature for actual shyness. Emma had a genuinely playful side that emerged fully when she felt safe and comfortable. She loved to sing, her small voice surprisingly strong and melodic, and she had recently started taking beginner piano lessons at the community center, practicing diligently on the small keyboard Ashley had saved for months to purchase for her. The relationship between Ashley and Emma was something truly beautiful to witness firsthand. They were more than simply mother and daughter. They were best friends, confidants, a team facing the world together side by side. Every morning, their routine remained the same. Ashley would wake Emma with gentle kisses on her forehead. They'd have breakfast together at their small kitchen table, Ashley braiding Emma's hair carefully while the little girl chattered enthusiastically about her dreams from the night before. After school concluded, Emma would help her mother prepare dinner, standing on a step stool to reach the counter properly, her small hands learning to measure ingredients and stir pots under Ashley's patient and loving guidance. Bedtime meant stories, always at least 2 full chapters, with Ashley doing different voices for each character, while Emma giggled delightedly and begged for just 1 more page. But there was another important figure in their small family unit: Margaret Mitchell, Ashley's mother and Emma's grandmother. At 63 years old, Margaret lived alone in the house where Ashley had grown up as a child, a modest 2-story home on Elm Street, with a well-maintained garden and that distinctive white picket fence. Margaret was a retired librarian, a woman of strict routine and particular habits, known throughout the community as reserved but respectable. She attended church every Sunday without fail, volunteered at the local food bank once a month regularly, and kept her home absolutely immaculate. To neighbors passing by, she seemed like the quintessential grandmother figure, and indeed, she was often seen with Emma, taking her to the park or the library for special outings. Ashley visited her mother regularly and consistently, usually stopping by twice a week with Emma in tow. These visits were part obligation, part genuine desire to maintain family connection and bonds. Margaret had helped Ashley significantly after Emma was born, providing childcare during those early difficult years, offering financial assistance when money was impossibly tight and scarce. Ashley felt deeply indebted, felt that maintaining a solid relationship with her mother was not just the right thing to do morally, but absolutely necessary. She wanted Emma to know her grandmother personally, to have that extended family connection, especially since Emma's paternal side was completely absent from their lives entirely. On the surface level, these visits seemed perfectly normal, even sweet. A grandmother doting lovingly on her only grandchild. A daughter dutifully caring for her aging mother. But beneath that carefully maintained surface, in ways that would only become clear much later, something was terribly, horrifically wrong and disturbing. The community of Riverside itself played a significant role in this story, a supporting character that would become crucial in the days and years to come. Ahead. This was a town where people genuinely knew each other, where the local diners served as an informal community center, where the annual 4th of July parade was the major event of the year. It was the kind of place where people looked out for one another naturally, where a missing child would mobilize hundreds of volunteers within hours of notification. Riverside sat nestled comfortably in a valley surrounded by dense Oregon forest, the kind of landscape that was breathtakingly beautiful, but could also be tremendously unforgiving, where searchers could walk within feet of something important and never see it through the thick undergrowth and towering Douglas firs. This particular geography would become both a blessing and a curse in the investigation that was about to unfold dramatically. March 15, 2015, dawned gray and drizzly, typical weather conditions for Oregon in early spring season. The temperature hovered around 52 degrees Fahrenheit, with intermittent rain showers that turned the streets slick and made the evergreens seem even more vibrant green against the pewter sky above. It was a Sunday, and Ashley had the day off from the dental office where she worked. She and Emma had attended the early service at Riverside Community Church, where Emma had participated enthusiastically in the children's choir, her small voice blending with others in a rendition of "This Little Light of Mine" that had made Ashley's eyes mist with maternal pride. After church concluded, around 11:30 in the morning, Ashley texted her mother to confirm their planned visit that afternoon. The text message, later recovered carefully by investigators, read, "Hi, Mom. We'll be there around 2 p.m. Emma wants to show you her art project from school. See you soon." Margaret's response came within minutes of receiving the message. "Perfect. I made lemon cookies, Emma's favorite. Drive safely in the rain." These mundane exchanges, the everyday communication between mother and daughter, would become crucial evidence, dissected thoroughly for hidden meanings, analyzed carefully for clues that nobody could have possibly seen at the time. They had lunch at home in their apartment, where Ashley made Emma's favorite grilled cheese sandwiches, cutting them into triangles the way Emma particularly liked. A neighbor, Mr. Robert Chen, who lived in the apartment directly below theirs, would later tell police officers he heard them singing. Together happily, heard Emma's delighted laughter echoing through the thin walls around 1 o'clock that afternoon. At approximately 1:45 in the afternoon, Ashley and Emma left their apartment building. Mrs. Dorothy Sanders, an elderly neighbor who lived across the hall from them, saw them in the hallway. She would later recall every single detail to investigators with remarkable clarity. Ashley was wearing jeans, a gray sweater, and a navy blue rain jacket for protection. Emma wore pink leggings, a white t-shirt with a rainbow design on it, and her favorite purple hoodie, the one with cat ears on the hood that she adored. Emma carried a large piece of construction paper, her art project, carefully protected in a clear plastic folder. They were holding hands, Mrs. Sanders remembered clearly, her voice breaking even months later when giving her official statement. Ashley smiled at me warmly, and Emma waved cheerfully. Emma said, "We're going to Grandma's." She was so excited, so genuinely excited. That image, that precious moment of simple joy, would haunt everyone who heard about it subsequently. Ashley's vehicle, a 10-year-old silver Honda Civic with a distinctive dent in the rear bumper and an Emma's name sticker in the back window, was captured by a traffic camera on Main Street at exactly 1:53 p.m., heading toward the western part of town where Margaret's house was located. The drive from Ashley's apartment to Margaret's home normally took approximately 12 minutes under regular conditions. Phone records showed Ashley's cell phone connected to the tower nearest Margaret's house at 2:07 p.m., indicating they had arrived roughly on schedule as planned. And then, nothing whatsoever. No more texts sent, no more calls made, no more sightings reported. Ashley and Emma Mitchell simply vanished completely, as if the earth had opened up and swallowed them whole without a trace. When Ashley didn't show up for work Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, her co-workers were immediately and deeply concerned. Ashley had never missed work without calling ahead, not once in her 6 years at the practice. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the dentist who owned the practice, tried calling Ashley's cell phone repeatedly throughout the morning, but each call went straight to voicemail without ringing. By 9 a.m., growing increasingly worried, Dr. Walsh called the Riverside Police Department to request a welfare check on Ashley. Officer David Miller was dispatched to Ashley's apartment at 9:30 in the morning. He knocked repeatedly on the door, receiving no answer whatsoever. Mrs. Sanders heard the commotion in the hallway and came out to investigate, telling the officer she had seen Ashley and Emma leave Sunday afternoon, that they were going to visit Ashley's mother. Officer Miller then drove directly to Margaret Mitchell's house on Elm Street to continue his investigation. Margaret answered the door at 10:15 a.m., appearing calm, but appropriately concerned about the situation. According to Officer Miller's official report, Margaret stated that Ashley and Emma had indeed visited Sunday afternoon as planned, arriving around 2 p.m. as scheduled. She said they had stayed for approximately 2 hours, that Emma had shown her the art project proudly, that they had eaten cookies and drunk hot chocolate together. Margaret claimed Ashley had mentioned stopping by the grocery store on the way home, that they had left her house around 4 p.m. in the afternoon. She seemed perfectly fine and normal, Margaret told the officer, wringing her hands with apparent worry. I have no idea where they could possibly be. Oh, God. You don't think something terrible happened to them, do you? Officer Miller, finding no visible signs of distress or evidence of anything wrong at Margaret's residence, thanked her politely and left to continue the investigation elsewhere. By Monday evening, when Ashley still hadn't returned home and her phone remained completely off, panic began to genuinely set in among family and friends. Margaret herself called the police station multiple times throughout the evening, her voice increasingly frantic, begging them to organize a proper search immediately. The case was officially classified as a missing persons investigation at 6 p.m. Monday, March 16th, roughly 28 hours after Ashley and Emma were last definitively seen by witnesses. Detective Sarah Thompson, a 15-year veteran of the Riverside PD, was assigned as lead investigator on the case. Her first significant break came Tuesday morning when Ashley's Honda Civic was discovered in the parking lot of Riverside State Park, approximately 8 miles from Margaret's house. The car was completely unlocked, the keys still in the ignition. Ashley's purse was on the passenger seat, her wallet inside containing her driver's license, all her credit cards, and $43 in cash. Emma's booster seat was in the back seat, along with the plastic folder containing her art project, pristine and completely untouched. There was no visible sign of struggle, no blood evidence, no evidence of violence whatsoever. It was as if Ashley had parked the car, intending to return momentarily, and simply never came back at all. The location was deeply troubling. Riverside State Park was a sprawling area of dense forest with multiple hiking trails, some of which were poorly maintained and rarely used by visitors. The weather on Sunday had been rainy and unpleasant, making the trails muddy and potentially dangerous. Had Ashley and Emma gone for a walk and gotten lost in the wilderness? Had they encountered some kind of accident? Search teams mobilized immediately and with urgency. By Wednesday morning, over 200 volunteers from Riverside and surrounding communities had gathered at the park entrance. They were joined by professional search and rescue units from the county, K-9 teams with trained dogs, and even a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging technology. For 5 full days, they combed methodically through miles of forest, searching under every log, checking every ravine carefully, following every trail systematically. The dogs picked up a scent from the car initially, but lost it within 100 yards, frustrated by the rain that had fallen Sunday evening and Monday morning, washing away critical traces. Divers searched the nearby river thoroughly. Emergency responders checked the local hospital, morgues, even homeless encampments in the area. Ashley and Emma had simply disappeared without a trace, and with each passing day, hope dimmed just a little more noticeably. Detective Thompson interviewed everyone in Ashley's life comprehensively: co-workers, friends, neighbors, Emma's teachers, even Emma's absent father, who was tracked down in California and had an ironclad alibi for the time in question. Everyone painted the same consistent picture. Ashley was a devoted mother, responsible and reliable, not prone to erratic behavior whatsoever. She had no history of mental health issues, no drug or alcohol problems, no financial troubles severe enough to warrant running away from her life. Emma was a happy, healthy child with no signs of abuse or neglect visible. There were no custody disputes, no threatening ex-boyfriends, no suspicious strangers reported in their neighborhood recently. It was a mystery without obvious suspects or clear motives, the peak kind that keeps investigators awake at night because nothing makes logical sense. Multiple interviews were conducted with Margaret Mitchell over several weeks. Each time, her story remained perfectly consistent. Ashley and Emma had visited Sunday afternoon, stayed approximately 2 hours, left around 4 p.m., planning to stop at the grocery store. Margaret appeared genuinely devastated, appropriate for a woman who had lost both her daughter and granddaughter simultaneously. She provided photos of Ashley and Emma to help with the search efforts, appeared at press conferences begging for information from the public, kept a vigil candle burning in her window visible to anyone passing by her house. To the community at large, Margaret was a tragic figure, a grandmother desperately hoping for her family's safe return. Detective Thompson noted something in her official reports, though: a certain flatness in Margaret's affect during private interviews, moments where her grief seemed performed, rather than genuinely felt. But grief manifests differently in everyone, and there was no evidence whatsoever connecting Margaret to any wrongdoing at all. Her house had been searched with her full permission. Nothing suspicious was found anywhere. Her phone records were completely clean. She had no criminal history, not even a single parking ticket. As weeks turned gradually to months, the case grew cold despite the department's absolute best efforts. Tips came in regularly, but led nowhere. Productive. Supposed sightings in other states that proved to be other women with daughters. Psychics claiming to have visions that resulted in futile searches. Conspiracy theories posted online by amateur detectives with wild theories. Ashley's apartment remained untouched, waiting for her return, until eventually the landlord had to clear it out for financial reasons. Margaret claimed Emma's belongings, saying she wanted to preserve her granddaughter's things carefully. That when Emma came home eventually, she'd want her toys and clothes waiting for her. The community held vigils on the anniversary of the disappearance year after year, never forgetting Ashley and Emma Mitchell, never giving up hope even as that hope became increasingly difficult to maintain realistically. 8 years is a tremendously long time to carry hope forward. 8 years of birthdays uncelebrated, of Christmas mornings without the sound of a child's laughter, of Mother's Days marked by absence rather than presence. For the people of Riverside, Ashley and Emma Mitchell became a permanent scar on the community's collective consciousness, a constant reminder that terrible things could happen even in places that felt safe and secure. Every March 15th, the local newspaper ran a story, keeping the case alive in the public eye consistently. Dr. Walsh kept Ashley's position at the dental office filled, but always referred to it as Ashley's chair, maintaining the fiction that maybe, somehow, someday, Ashley would walk back through the door. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Holmes, who had since retired from teaching, kept the art project Emma had made that day, the one that had been found in the car, unable to bring herself to throw it away ever. Margaret Mitchell, now 71 years old in 2023, had become something of a symbol for enduring grief throughout the community. She had aged visibly over the 8 long years, her hair completely white now, deep lines etched permanently around her eyes and mouth. She still lived in the same house on Elm Street, maintaining it meticulously, as she always had throughout her life, though neighbors noted she seemed to spend more time indoors now, her garden not quite as immaculate as it once was previously. She attended church less frequently than before, and when she did attend, she sat alone in the same pew, declining invitations to join social activities with other congregation members. She's still waiting for them to come. Home, people would say sympathetically, shaking their heads sadly. She can't let go of them. Margaret had converted Emma's old room, the one Ashley had used as a child, into a shrine of sorts. Photographs covering the walls completely, Emma's toys arranged carefully on shelves, a small desk where Emma had sometimes done coloring books during visits to grandmother's house. Detective Thompson, now a sergeant after promotion, had never completely let go of the case either mentally. Even as new cases demanded her attention, even as she investigated other crimes and solved other mysteries successfully, the Mitchell case haunted her persistently. She kept the file on her desk, reviewing it periodically, hoping that fresh eyes or new perspective might reveal something previously missed or overlooked. Over the years, advancements in investigative technology had provided new avenues to explore, potentially. In 2019, the department had used genetic genealogy successfully to solve a 20-year-old cold case, and Thompson wondered if similar techniques might help locate Ashley and Emma, if their remains were out there somewhere waiting to be found eventually. She had Ashley's and Emma's DNA profiles in the system, waiting for a match that never came through. The investigation had explored numerous theories over the years systematically. The prevailing assumption was that Ashley and Emma had met with foul play, likely from a stranger abduction, though the circumstances made this theory puzzling. Why would Ashley have driven to the state park specifically? Had someone followed her from Margaret's house, forced her there at gunpoint perhaps? But there was no evidence of any other vehicle in the park's sparse security footage available. Had Ashley arranged to meet someone there deliberately? But her phone records showed no suspicious communications whatsoever. Another theory suggested Ashley had intentionally disappeared to start a new life, elsewhere, perhaps fleeing from something or someone unknown to investigators. But she had left behind her wallet, her identification, everything necessary to start over properly. And would a loving mother really put her 6-year-old daughter through such trauma willingly? It seemed completely incomprehensible. Theories about Margaret had been raised occasionally, but never gained serious traction. Some people found it suspicious that Margaret was the last person to see Ashley and Emma alive, that the timing was so precise. They visited Margaret, left her house, and vanished within hours afterward. But what motive would Margaret possibly have? She had appeared devoted to both her daughter and granddaughter consistently. There were no reports of family conflict, no history of abuse whatsoever, no financial gain from their deaths since they were missing, not declared deceased legally. Margaret herself had been polygraphed twice at her own insistence, passing both times, apparently, though experienced investigators knew that psychopaths could sometimes beat polygraphs successfully. Detective Thompson had interviewed Margaret dozens of times over the years, always looking for inconsistencies, always watching carefully for tells. Margaret's story never wavered by a single detail, and short of concrete evidence, there was nothing Thompson could do except file away her lingering doubts and suspicions. Then, in January 2023, something shifted dramatically. The Riverside Police Department received an anonymous tip through their online portal system. The message was brief and direct. Margaret Mitchell knows what happened to Ashley and Emma. Check the basement. Check under the garden. Anonymous tips were common occurrences, and most led nowhere productive, but something about this one felt different to Thompson instinctively. The specificity of it, the directness. The tipster clearly had local knowledge, mentioning Margaret by name specifically, referencing specific locations in her house. Thompson ran the IP address, but it had been routed through multiple proxies, making it essentially untraceable. She shared the tip with her captain, who authorized a preliminary investigation to follow up. Thompson began by pulling Margaret's financial records, something they hadn't thoroughly reviewed in years. What she found was interesting and noteworthy. In the months immediately following Ashley and Emma's disappearance, Margaret had made several purchases that seemed odd for a retired librarian living alone. A heavy-duty carpet cleaner rented from a hardware store on March 16, 2015, the day immediately after the disappearance. Large quantities of lime purchased from a garden center on March 18. A new water heater installed in April 2015. The old one carted away by the installation company. None of these things were inherently suspicious individually. People made home improvements all the time. But the timing was noteworthy and compelling, and lime was known to accelerate decomposition of organic matter. Thompson felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up as puzzle pieces began clicking together in new and terrible configurations. She obtained Margaret's credit card statements going back further in time. In February 2015, 1 month before the disappearance, Margaret had renewed a storage unit lease she'd had for 15 years consecutively. Thompson obtained a warrant for the storage unit and found it mostly empty except for boxes of old books and papers, nothing suspicious visible. But the very fact that Margaret had maintained it all these years, paying the monthly fees consistently, suggested she used it regularly for something. Thompson then did something she'd never thought to do before. She cross-referenced Margaret's library computer logs from her years working there as a librarian. Retired librarians kept their library cards active, permanently, and Margaret's showed regular usage. Thompson obtained the list of books Margaret had checked out over the years. The titles made her blood run cold. Books on human anatomy, decomposition processes, criminal investigation procedures. In February 2015, Margaret had checked out a book titled Forensic Science for Dummies. Armed with this circumstantial evidence and the anonymous tip, Thompson petitioned for a search warrant for Margaret's property, focusing specifically on the basement and garden areas. A judge, noting the totality of circumstances and the fact that 8 years had passed without resolution in a missing persons case involving a child, granted the warrant officially. On February 14, 2023, Valentine's Day, a date Thompson would never forget for the rest of her life, she arrived at Margaret Mitchell's house at 6 a.m. with a full forensic team, ground-penetrating radar equipment, and a sense of dread in her stomach that told her they were about to find something nobody wanted to find. Margaret answered the door in her bathrobe, appearing surprised but not frightened whatsoever. "Have you found them?" she asked, her voice hopeful sounding. "Have you found my girls?" Thompson served the warrant officially, explaining that they needed to conduct a thorough search of the property. Margaret's expression barely changed noticeably. "Of course," she said calmly. "Search whatever you need to search. I just want them found." She was escorted to a patrol car to wait while the search was conducted, offered coffee and a blanket against the cold February morning air. She sat quietly, watching the activity around her home with an unreadable expression on her face throughout. The forensic team started with the basement, a finished space that Margaret used as a craft room and storage area primarily. At first glance, it appeared normal and ordinary. Shelves of holiday decorations, boxes of old photos, a sewing machine in one corner. But luminol testing revealed something horrific and undeniable. Massive blood evidence on the floor beneath the carpet, in patterns consistent with attempts to clean up thoroughly. The carpet itself was relatively new, installed in April 2015, according to receipts they found. Beneath that carpet, the concrete floor told a story written in blood that had soaked deep into the porous material despite aggressive cleaning attempts. The concentration was heaviest near the back wall, an area measuring roughly 10 feet by 10 feet. The amount of blood indicated a significant violent event, injuries that would have been fatal, certainly. As the forensic team worked inside methodically, the ground-penetrating radar crew scanned the backyard garden carefully. That beautiful space with its roses and lilies and carefully maintained beds. The radar showed anomalies beneath the soil in 2 locations, both approximately 6 feet deep, both in the section of garden that Margaret had always said was her private area, where she didn't want visitors trampling her special perennials. The excavation began carefully, forensically, every scoop of earth photographed and catalogued properly. At 2:30 in the afternoon, 8 hours after the search began, a shovel struck something solid beneath the earth. A forensic anthropologist brushed away soil carefully to reveal fabric, deteriorated but still recognizable. A gray sweater. Ashley's gray sweater, the one she'd been wearing the day she disappeared. Beneath that sweater, wrapped in plastic sheeting and a tarp, were human remains, and 6 feet away, in the second location, more remains, smaller, much smaller in size. A purple hoodie with cat ears, faded but unmistakable and heartbreaking. Detective Thompson walked slowly to the patrol car, where Margaret sat waiting. The elderly woman looked up, her face expressionless and blank. "We found them, Margaret," Thompson said quietly but firmly. "We found Ashley and Emma." For a long moment, Margaret said nothing whatsoever, simply stared ahead through the windshield. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice flat and devoid of emotion completely. "I suppose you'll want to know why." It wasn't a question at all. It was a statement of fact. And with those 6 words, the careful facade Margaret Mitchell had maintained for 8 years finally crumbled entirely. She was placed under arrest immediately, read her rights, and transported to the Riverside Police Department. In the interview room, with cameras rolling and a lawyer provided, Margaret Mitchell confessed to murdering her daughter and granddaughter. The details of her confession were chilling in their calm recitation and matter-of-fact delivery. Ashley and Emma had indeed visited on March 15, 2015. They had arrived around 2 p.m., just as Margaret had always said, truthfully. But they never left at 4 p.m. as claimed. An argument had erupted. Margaret claimed over Ashley's parenting decisions. Margaret had criticized Ashley's choices harshly, her struggles with money, her decision to raise Emma alone without a husband. Words escalated into a physical confrontation quickly. According to Margaret, Ashley had tried to leave, to take Emma and go home. Margaret couldn't allow that to happen, she said coldly. In her warped logic, she believed Ashley was ruining Emma's life, that the child deserved better circumstances. In a moment of rage, Margaret struck Ashley with a heavy bookend from the mantel. Ashley fell, hitting her head on the brick hearth hard. Emma screamed in terror, and Margaret, realizing what she'd done, panicked. She couldn't let Emma tell anyone what had happened, so she suffocated the 6-year-old child with a pillow, watching as the little girl who had called her grandma with such love took her last breath. Margaret had then spent the next several hours staging the disappearance carefully. She wrapped the bodies in plastic sheeting, carried them to the basement, and cleaned the crime scene with a meticulous attention to detail born from years of reading crime novels and forensic books. She had been preparing, it seemed, planning for contingencies, even if she hadn't consciously decided to kill beforehand. That night, after dark, she used Ashley's keys to drive Ashley's car to the state park, knowing it would misdirect the investigation toward the wilderness. She wiped down the car carefully and thoroughly, leaving Ashley's purse to make it seem like she'd stepped away momentarily. Margaret then walked the 8 miles home through the forest, avoiding roads, arriving back at her house around midnight. Over the next few days, she buried her daughter and granddaughter in her garden, planting new flowers over the graves, tending them lovingly for 8 years while the community searched and mourned. She had literally buried her secret beneath beauty, beneath life, growing from death. The psychological profile that emerged of Margaret Mitchell painted a picture of a deeply disturbed individual who had hidden her true nature for decades successfully. Experts described her as having narcissistic personality disorder combined with psychopathic traits, an inability to feel genuine empathy, a need for absolute control, and a profound belief that she was superior to others and thus entitled to make life-or-death decisions. Her former colleagues from the library, when interviewed after Saint-Idris, her arrest, shared disturbing stories they'd dismissed at the time. Margaret's rigid insistence on rules, her harsh criticism of patrons she deemed unworthy, her particular disdain for single mothers whom she viewed as failures. Ashley, her own daughter, had been the ultimate disappointment in Margaret's eyes, an embarrassment that Margaret tolerated but never truly accepted. Investigators discovered Margaret's journals, kept meticulously for decades, which revealed the depth of her disturbance. Entries about Ashley were cold and critical, even from Ashley's childhood years. Complaints about her grades, her friends, her choices, her weakness of character. After Emma was born, Margaret's writings took on an obsessive quality. Entries where she fantasized about raising Emma herself, properly, without Ashley's influence. In February 2015, just weeks before the murders, Margaret had written, "Ashley is destroying that child. Emma deserves better. Someone needs to intervene before it's too late." The journals never explicitly stated an intention to murder, but they demonstrated a long-standing resentment and a delusional belief system that viewed Ashley as an obstacle to be removed. The community of Riverside was devastated by the revelation that evil had hidden among them for so long, that the grieving grandmother they'd comforted had been the killer all along. The annual vigils became memorial services, the hope for return transformed into mourning for confirmed loss. Ashley and Emma were finally laid to rest in a funeral attended by hundreds. their graves marked by headstones engraved with loving messages from people who had never stopped searching, never stopped caring. Dr. Walsh spoke at the service, remembering Ashley's kindness and dedication. Mrs. Holmes read a poem Emma had written in first grade about butterflies, and Detective Thompson, not typically emotional, wept openly for the victim she had fought 8 years to find. Margaret Mitchell was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Despite her confession, her lawyer attempted to argue diminished capacity, claiming that she had suffered a psychotic break during the argument with Ashley. But the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The books on forensics checked out before the crime, the careful staging of the car at the state park, the methodical cleanup and burial, the 8 years of successfully maintaining a false persona while under repeated police scrutiny. In November 2023, at age 71, Margaret was convicted on both counts and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. She showed no emotion as the verdict was read, no remorse during her victim impact statement opportunities, which she declined. She was transported to Oregon State Correctional Institution, where she remains today, a cautionary tale of how monsters can hide behind grandmotherly facades. The anonymous tip that had broken the case open was never definitively traced, though investigators had theories. The leading speculation was that it came from someone who had known Margaret personally, perhaps another library colleague or even a family member who had harbored suspicions but lacked proof until enough time had passed to feel safe coming forward. Whoever it was, their decision to finally speak up had given Ashley and Emma justice and their community closure. Detective Thompson kept a photo on her desk. Ashley and Emma smiling together, taken at Emma's 6th birthday party just 2 months before they died. It reminded her why the work mattered, why persistence mattered, why giving up was never an option. This case resonates beyond Riverside, beyond Oregon, because it touches on fundamental fears that many parents carry, that those we trust with our children might not be trustworthy, that family members can harbor dark secrets, that the people who smile at us across the dinner table might be capable of unspeakable acts. The Mitchell case also highlights critical lessons for investigators. Never dismiss circumstantial evidence. Always trust your instincts even when they can't be immediately proven. And understand that some criminals are exceptionally skilled at deception. Margaret Mitchell had passed polygraphs successfully, maintained a consistent story throughout, and performed grief convincingly for 8 full years. Only persistent investigation and eventual physical evidence could penetrate her lies and deception. Today, Riverside has established the Ashley and Emma Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers and providing resources for families in crisis situations. The foundation offers free counseling services, parenting classes, and emergency financial assistance, all aimed at ensuring no mother feels so overwhelmed that tragedy becomes inevitable. It's a positive legacy emerging from darkness, a way to honor Ashley's memory by helping others facing the struggles she faced. Emma's classroom at Riverside Elementary has a permanent butterfly garden, planted and maintained by successive classes of first graders who learn about the little girl who loved to read and sing and dream. The house on Elm Street, Margaret Mitchell's house, stood empty for months after her arrest, a source of morbid curiosity and discomfort for neighbors passing by. Eventually, it was purchased by the city and demolished completely, the lot transformed into a small memorial park with benches and a fountain, a place of peace where families can gather together. The white picket fence was torn down entirely. The garden that had hidden such horror was excavated and removed completely. No trace remains of the building where Ashley and Emma spent their final moments, where a grandmother became a murderer. Only the memory remains, and the determination that such evil will never again hide undetected in Riverside, Oregon. The case of Ashley and Emma Mitchell reminds us that justice, while sometimes delayed, can prevail ultimately. It reminds us to trust our instincts when something feels wrong, even if we can't articulate why clearly. And it reminds us that the most dangerous predators are often not strangers lurking in darkness, but familiar faces sitting across from us at Sunday dinner, smiling while harboring unimaginable darkness within their hearts. Ashley and Emma deserved better than the fate that befell them tragically. But at least now they rest in peace finally, their story told completely, their killer facing consequences, and a community forever changed by their loss, determined to ensure their memory becomes a force for good in the world.